A beloved 22-year-old man is snatched off the streets of San Jose, California. His kidnapping and murder will cause the quiet, peaceful towns to morph into a violent mob hell bent on dishing out vigilante justice. Welcome to History is Criminal. This week, Kimberly and I take a look at the horrific events of November 1933 that caused the residents of San Jose to take the law into their own hands in a shockingly violent way. And with me, as usual, on this journey is my lovely wife and co host, the unapologetic and unqualified Kimberly. How's it hanging, Kimberly? Did you get the fun?
Oh, I definitely got the pun. Can't wait to dive into the chaos of 1933 with you. Because nothing says quiet, peaceful town like turning into a full on mob movie. Popcorn ready, history hats on, and maybe a few snide remarks on the way. Let's dig into this dirty past again.
We all know that the Great Depression brought tremendous change to the United States. Political power would swing from the Republicans to the Democrats. FDR's New Deal would forever change how Americans interacted with their government, as programs like Social Security became part of the new norm. But what many probably didn't know is that it also brought about a weird golden age of kidnapping, fueled by widespread poverty, crippling depression, and the lure of easy money. Kidnappings accelerated starting in 1929. There was, of course, the most famous kidnapping of the age, that of the Lindbergh baby in 1932. That case ended unsolved and with the tragic death of the child of America's aviator, Charles Lindbergh. Others went much smoother. Take, for example, the case of William Ham. Ham, the heir to the brewery fortune, if you are familiar with American beers, Ham's, of course. Kidnapping was in 1933, but he was released unharmed after the payment of $100,000. By 1933, all of his captors were in jail as the newly named FBI used fingerprints lifted from the ransom note to ID the suspects. This was one of the first times fingerprints were lifted off of paper in order to nab criminals. In all, there were 8 high profile abductions in 1933.
Yes, the Great Depression wasn't just tough on wallets, apparently made grab a stranger for cash a full time hobby for some. From the unsolved heartbreak of the Lindbergh baby to William Ham lucking out like, cool, here's a check. I'll see myself out. It's wild how desperate times sparked both tragedy and the occasional happy ending. 8 headline grabbing kidnappings in 1 year. That's like crime's version of a hit parade, but with way less singing and way more panic.
Panic indeed. As Prohibition was drawing to a close, the nation was on edge. The Volstead Act, which banned the legal sale of alcohol in 1920, helped give rise to an age of lawlessness known as the Roaring Twenties. Add to that the sheer hopelessness that many felt during the Great Depression, and the sometimes ordinary people turned to extreme measures. At times, this frustration was directed at those who seemed to be weathering the economic crisis better than others. Angers, sometimes justified, other times just petty jealousy, boiled into acts of violence or stupidity. But the Hart family of San Jose seemed above any of that. In 1866, Jewish immigrant Leopold Hart opened his store, L. Hart and Son Company, a department store in the center of San Jose, offering high quality and fair prices. The store became a success and was a staple for the shoppers in San Jose and the surrounding area. When Leopold passed away, his son Alex took over. Alex was active in the community, becoming a well respected businessman and neighbor. And in 1911, he had a son, Brooke, named for his mother.
I see where this is going. Family business vibes, meet small town legend status. Leopold Hart clearly knew the secret. Treat people right, and they'll keep coming back. Then along comes Alex, taking over the reins like community MVP. And little Brooke is born into the perfect blend of business smarts and hometown charm. The stage is set. And honestly, I'm already bracing myself for the drama to come.
Tall, smart, good looking. Brooke was no spoiled rich kid. Alex started him in the store as a stock boy while he was still in grade school. He believed that if his son was going to take over the business someday, then he needed to know it from the ground up. Young Brooke first worked in the stockroom and bagging merchandise, then on the floor and behind the counter. Alex later told reporters that it was the way his father brought him into the business and that he looked forward to the day when Brooke would take over the active conduct in the store. By the time Brooke was a teenager, the store boasted over 200 employees and managed to keep providing those paychecks even as the Depression hit. In 1929, Brooke went to Santa Clara University, where he not only received an excellent grades, but excelled on the college tennis team. It'd be fair to say that at 6 foot tall, trim, blonde haired, Brooke was the golden boy of San Jose. He was well known, and almost everybody in the town of 60,000 people had shopped at his family store and had seen or been waited on by the handsome, friendly young man. Those who knew him liked him. It was said he was a bit mischievous and genuinely kind. The family didn't try to downplay their success. Alex had built a beautiful Victorian style mansion that sat on a hill. People would drive by the home just to get a look at the manicured yards. Brooke drove a new 1933 Studebaker Roadster that was said to be the envy of every young man in town, and honestly, envy of me too. The Harts were that rare thing, rich people who knew hard work and didn't look down on others. They were well liked because of it.
Brooke, the 6 foot blonde golden boy of San Jose, had it all: looks, charm, a green Studebaker, and a family rich enough to make you squint at their mansion. And yet, somehow, they weren't jerks. I'm finding it hard to insert my usual snarkiness and sass here, Mick. You're not giving me much ammo.
Well, occasionally some people are just good. On the 9th of November, 1933, Alex was scheduled to attend a dinner with friends at the Chamber of Commerce in San Jose Country Club. Because Alex didn't drive himself, he asked Brooke to give him a ride to the club in order to make dinner by 6. The club was nearby, so at 5:55, according to Alex, Brooke left him on the street and walked to the parking garage where he kept the Studebaker parked. A half hour passed and Alex became nervous. The garage was only a couple minutes walk from the store. If there was an issue with the car, Brooke would have surely walked back and told his father. Alex also knew that his son had his own plans for 6:30 that evening, but he would never abandon his father on the street. Nonetheless, Alex found a ride to his meeting. After the meeting, he headed home, likely curious to hear why his son had left him standing on the curb in front of the store. It was then that he learned Brooke hadn't come home. Enter in our story two men, John Jack Holmes and Thomas Harold Thurmond. Holmes was a local boy whose father had run a tailor shop in San Jose. He'd been a football star at San Jose High School before being kicked out of school after an argument with a teacher. Now, there's no record as to what that argument was and whether or not it turned to more than words, but it was bad enough to get him kicked out of school. He still managed to find a good job and was able to maintain employment even as the Depression hit. It was while working at a gas station that he met some local hoodlums. That was the word actually used in the sources I looked at, hoodlums, and started an obsession with crime and criminal.
That's always a good obsession.
Yes. Though he had no criminal record of his own, reportedly he read newspapers and crime reports in an attempt to see where the criminals had went wrong. He believed he could plan and execute the perfect crime. And history is full of people who made that mistake, luckily for us. By 1933, he was 29, married with two children. By all accounts, he seemed like a regular guy with a hope of finding a way to make a little easy money.
Just a regular guy with a wife and 2 kids. A classic family man. Isn't that what the standard comment is when reporters interview neighbors after a crime? I feel like my sass muscle is about to get serious workout here,
Yeah, always, he was such a quiet boy.
right?
It was while working as a sales rep for an oil company that he met Thomas Holmes, a gas station attendant that worked along his route. Holmes was 2 years younger and was a transplant to San Jose from Lodi. The two men shared a fascination with the idea that they could pull off the perfect crime. Using Holmes' knowledge of how oil companies worked along the California coast, on the 25th of September, they kidnapped and robbed a courier from the Union Oil Company. The pair netted $716 from the caper, translates into just over 17,000 in 2025. More importantly, they seemed to get away clean. On the 23rd of October, they followed up by abducting and robbing the courier of the Shell Oil Company. This time, the take was $700. In both cases, the victim was released unharmed. In just two jobs, they had taken enough money to buy a small home in many rural parts of the country in 1933. So, not a bad haul.
Not bad at all.
To Holmes, it seems he was living his dreams of conducting the perfect crime. They just needed a bigger target.
Uh-oh.
It was 18-year-old Alcee who answered the phone at approximately 9:45 that night. A man on the other end of the line said they had Brooke and he had been taken, and if they wanted to see him alive, they would have to pay a $40,000 ransom. This was a sizable fortune in Depression era 1933. He said that the police were contacted, Brooke would be killed, and instructions were given to them to wait for further calls. Alex Hart wasted no time calling the San Jose police chief, John Black. The Division of Investigation, an early name for the FBI, was contacted and an APB was put out for Brooks Studebaker. Things moved quickly. A tap was placed on the Hart's phone, and the phone company was ready to trace any incoming calls. An agent was placed in the Hart's home to monitor events. Brooks' car was found later that night. An employee of L. Hart and Sons Company recognized the car. It was abandoned on the side of the road outside of San Jose. The lights were on and the door was open, but there were no signs of Brooke. After 2 days of waiting for a call from the kidnappers, the Harts went to the press. Alex gave an interview with the San Francisco Chronicle. He talked about how kind Brooke was and how the family was holding up and asked for any help in locating Brooke. In a twist that was never fully explained, Brooke's wallet was found that same day, the 11th of November, on the railing of a ship docked in San Francisco. The ship was en route to Los Angeles, then on to Mexico. It was boarded in LA, and the passengers were forced to wait, including, All-Star Hall of Famer Babe Ruth, who was on that ship, while the ship was searched stem to stern. No sign of Brooke was found on the ship.
Ah, yes. Family goes public. Brooke Wallet shows up like it's been on a little sightseeing tour. Come on, Mick. I'm finding it's hard to land my usual sass. Because honestly, how do you roast a wallet? But seriously, Brooke, your things are showing up in more exotic places than I've ever been.
On Monday, a note from the kidnappers came in the mail, postmarked Sacramento. It said, "One more peep to the police and he's finished." It then told the Harts to put $40,000 into a black satchel. The kidnappers said to have the radio installed in the Studebaker and tuned to a local radio station for instructions. Over the next few days, several people contacted the family in attempts to extort money from them. Then on the 15th, a second letter from the kidnappers arrived. It instructed Alex to take the money and drive alone towards LA. If Alex agreed, he was to place a sign with a large number 2 in the window of his stores. There was one major problem with this plan. Alex had never learned how to drive a car. So he placed the number 2 in the window with a second sign that read, "I cannot drive." At 8 p.m., the kidnappers called. Alex and the now frustrated kidnappers had a conversation that was recorded in part It went like this: Kidnapper. Mr. Hart, you had our serial number in the window this afternoon. Alex. Yes, it was there. I can't drive. Mr. Hart, you get, and there's a long pause, some member of your family and leave PDQ. Alex. I can't drive and I'm in no physical condition to take a trip. Kidnapper. Mr. Hart, I want your answer. Yes or no, will you go? Alex. I'm willing to deal with you to do anything in my power to get my boy back, but I'm unable to leave now. When the kidnappers didn't know, but really should have if they were having any cognitive thoughts at all, is that at the same time, there was an FBI agent on another line with the phone company who was tracking the call. The operator was on a second line with the police, directing them to the phone booth at the corner of South Main and San Jose. A sizable number of police, led by Santa Clara County Sheriff William J. Emig, saw a man on the phone with his back to them.
Kidnappers thinking they're James Bond. FBI and police basically lurking like, "Oh, honey, bless your clueless little hearts." Mick, is more comedic than history is criminal.
At that same time, Alex had the kidnappers tied up in a discussion of how they were going to get the money if Alex couldn't drive. They were so involved in the conversation that they failed to notice over a dozen police closing in on the phone booth. The door of the booth was ripped open, and the caller quickly hung up the phone and spun around to find himself face to face with the sheriff. What's your name? Harold Thurman. At the police station, Thurman was questioned by local police and the FBI. His story started with he had nothing to do with the kidnapping. He was on the phone with a friend whose name and number he couldn't remember. Then the story changed and he was on the phone with his mother. The FBI report said he was questioned from approximately 8 p.m. until 2:30 a.m. He finally admitted that he was part of a plot to kidnap Brooke Hart. He said that he and Jack Holmes had grabbed Hart at the garage and driven him to San Mateo Bridge. There they bound Brooke and tossed him into San Francisco Bay. Brooke had died within an hour of his being taken.
Thurman keeps changing his story like he's auditioning for a soap opera. And finally, spoiler alert, he admits to the worst possible plot twist. Mick, I usually have snarks ready, but today it's a delicate dance. I can't sass the guy's terrible storytelling, but my heart's heavy for Brooke. Some stories make you shake your head and feel the lump in your throat at the same time.
He told how he had waited on the street in Holmes' car when Holmes jumped into Brooke's Studebaker and shoved a gun in his ribs. They then drove him up in the hills, dumping the Studebaker and transferring Brooke into Holmes's car. They took him to San Mateo Bridge, where they bound him with wire and attached two concrete blocks before shoving him over the rail. But Brooke managed to get loose from the wires and swim to the surface and started yelling for help. So Brooke is not going to go down easy. At which time Thurman fired 5 shots at him from the pistol. The yelling stopped. Thurman also told police that Holmes was waiting at his hotel for his partner to return. Now, you need to understand that the police interrogation techniques a little different in 1933, and we're still a good 30 years from Miranda. So,
Very true.
so there
Probably
might have been
wasn't the
some might have
wisest.
been it might have been some convincing going on in there when he decided to rat out his friend. Police had Thurman lead him to the hotel room and knock on the door. Holmes asked who was there, and Thurman replied, "It's me, Harold." As the door started to open, Jack Holmes, dressed only in his underwear, was slammed to the floor and arrested. Sheriff Emming was worried, and rightfully so, that interrogating Holmes in San Jose might be dangerous. He was transported to San Francisco for his interview. After first denying any involvement, he caved and corroborated Thurman's story, just adding more gory details. He told how they watched Brooke for a couple days before taking him. He also said from the start he couldn't think of a place to hold him and that it would just be smart to dump Brooke as soon as they took him. He willingly talked about how he had hit Brooke several times to let him know they meant business.
Wow. Okay, Mick, this is horrible. Like, I really have snark and sass lined up for ammunition, but what do I even do here? Kidnapping, murder, lying for 6 hours straight? I'm trying to find a punchline here, but I have nothing.
I'm not sure it's going to get a lot better. Before long, details of the confession leaked to the public. The local San Jose paper ran an editorial that said if any case was justifiable of lynching, it was this one. Then, competing San Francisco papers ran headlines, one saying, "Let justice be swift," and the other, "Seek noose for heart killers." The FBI requested the suspects undergo psychological testing to ascertain their mental state and prepare for a possible insanity defense. They refused to talk to the psychologist, but the FBI stated they had no mental defects. The pair was then transferred back to county jail on Market Street in San Jose. Alex Hart gave an interview with the San Francisco Chronicle. He detailed the family's grief, speaking about how his daughters had refused to be seen in public since the news of their brother's death. He also thanked the community for the outpouring of support the family had seen.
I mean, come on, Mick. I usually have quips or a jab ready, but not here. Hearing Alex talk about his family's grief and how his daughters can't even face the public, it's just, there's just no sass, no joke. That was just heartbreaking.
It is. Police and divers searched the area near San Mateo Bridge. A pillowcase was discovered. It was somehow known that Jackie Coogan, a former child actor and friend of Brooks, had lost a similar pillowcase. How the public knew Jackie Coogan had lost a pillowcase, I have no idea. I think people were way too much into actors' personal lives. A theory developed that the pillowcase had been in Brooks' car and was dumped at the scene. Coogan was even called in to examine the pillowcase, but couldn't confirm if it was his or not. A rumor started that the pillow case had been placed over Brooks' head while he was tortured by his kidnappers. Between this and the idea that they shot Brooke as he struggled to save himself only served to add fuel to an already inflamed public. Police and boats ran grappling hooks across the bottom of the bay near the San Mateo Bridge. Divers found wire and concrete blocks below the bridge. Some evidence supported that Brooke was alive when he went into the water. It looked as if someone had tried to climb the steel columns of the bridge. They saw where barnacles and stuff had been peeled off, and they said it looked like someone had tried to claw their way up there.
That's horrible.
The Chronicle ran this version of the story, saying he had clung to the pilings in a quote, frantic battle of youth against death. It would be two duck hunters who stumbled upon the body on the 26th of November. It was in bad shape. Crabs and other wildlife had eaten most of the exposed parts. The clothes had somehow managed to stay mostly intact. A friend, Charles O'Brien, was able to ID the remains. Less than an hour later, someone threw a rock at the door of the San Jose jail.
I'm trying to make sense of this, but nope, just nope. Who even thinks, okay, I'll throw a rock at a wall. That'll teach them.
People worried that an insanity defense would allow the killers to escape justice. Rumors started that a group of Brooks' friends planned to assault the jail and take justice in their own hands. A report by the FBI said there was no threat to the jail. Sheriff Emig handed out heavy weapons to the deputies, but still, it was reported there was, quote, no indication or evidence of any possible violence. On the 26th of November, everything changed. Hundreds gathered by the jail. Some actually carried torches and lit fires in garbage cans. As the crowd grew, the jail was surrounded. Occasionally, rock or bricks and bottles were hurled towards the jail. Sheriff Emig had the heavy doors of the jail reinforced and the lights shut off on the first floor. Give 'em to us! Give 'em up, Sheriff! Were shouted at the jail. Emig and his deputies were in an impossible position. The law required that they protect their prisoners. At the same time, would they use deadly force against their friends and neighbors to protect confessed killers? The crowd swelled to thousands. Holmes, from inside his jail cell, looked to a deputy and said, "It don't look good." At 8 p.m., first deputy fired a tear gas canister into the crowd. It had little effect. The crowd scattered, then returned in force, hurling more projectiles at the jail. By 9 p.m., the crowd was estimated at 5,000 people. Some were in the park across the street wielding torches. The jail's phone lines had been cut, making it impossible to call for reinforcements. Emig ordered that all weapons be taken and hidden on the third floor to hopefully lessen the bloodshed. He would later say, "We had enough guns to kill 1,000 people, but we didn't want to do it."
5,000 people wielding torches, projectiles flying, tear gas doing basically nothing, and Holmes in the cell going, "It don't look good." I mean, talk about an understatement.
Hmm. At 10 p.m., a note was delivered to the sheriff. It told him that at 11 o'clock, they were going to breach the jail and the police shouldn't stand in the way. Emig knew his handful of deputies stood no chance of holding back the mob. He ordered his men to do what they could, but to not resort to firearms. A new post office was under construction nearby. A group of men went to the site and returned with a length of 8-inch pipe and started to use this as a battering ram to bust down the door. A second group of about 20 men brought a second length of pipe to use as a second battering ram. Police fired tear gas from the upstairs windows, but it was of no use. The steel jail doors gave way. 17-year-old Anthony Cataldi bragged that he was the first of the hundreds to enter the jail. Deputies reportedly put up a fight but were soon overwhelmed. Sheriff Emmett suffered a skull fracture when he was trampled by the mob. Other deputies were injured in the melee as well. For their part, Thurman and Holmes put up a fight. Holmes was a large, powerful man who was able to get the better of some of the members of the mob before they got control of him. Thurman was beaten unconscious and was likely unaware of what was happening after being drugged from the jail cell. Men were dragged by their feet to the park. The crowd, now estimated at 10,000, kicked them and hit them with branches and threw rocks and bottles at them. Holmes, back on his feet, managed to knock some of the men to the ground, but his fighting seemed to just egg on the crowd. A young boy climbed high into a tree and tossed a rope over a limb. A noose was fashioned and placed around Holmes' neck. He managed to get the rope off, but a group of men quickly beat him and got the rope back on his neck and stripped him. Meanwhile, a rope was also fixed around the neck of the semi conscious Thurman. Thurman was pulled 10 feet off the ground. From reports, it sounds like he was either already dead or too far out of it to even struggle. Holmes, however, continued to fight until both his arms were broke. Then they strung him up. He convulsed and kicked, fighting to breathe. After a few minutes, it was over. The crowd cheered as they watched the two killers hang from the tree. Men held torches to Holmes's feet. It is unclear if this was to see if he was dead or just a way to desecrate the body. Either way, his socks caught fire, and some cheered, "Burn! Burn!" The crowd milled around for hours. Children played, and people snapped pictures. Police reportedly kept their distance on the edge of the park.
Okay, Mick, I usually have sass ready, but wow. 10,000 people, a fight that doesn't end, ropes, torches, and kids playing like it's a carnival. Sure, some might argue they deserved it. But this, really? This is beyond extreme. I mean, my snark is having a little meltdown here.
In the aftermath, Many of the same newspapers that helped fuel the call for vigilante justice now condemned the lynching. The lynching was even used in a Nazi propaganda show to show American savagery. Sheriff Emig and his men were in the hospital recovering from the injuries. The bodies of Thurman and Holmes were cut down and transported to the morgue. In a sick twist, they laid next to Brooke, whose family had yet to come get the body for burial. Others saw the lynching as a great act of justice. Telegrams of congratulations poured into San Jose and the governor's office. California Governor James Rolfe had promised to pardon anyone arrested for the lynching. He went as far as to say he wished he could release all the kidnappers in San Quentin and Folsom so they could face similar type of justice. This proved to be a very controversial position for the governor. He was expelled in his position in the National War Veterans, vilified in newspapers who started calling him Governor Lynch, and many public officials called for his impeachment. 7 men were arrested, including that 17-year-old Anthony who had bragged about being the first one in the jail. District Attorney Earl Warren, who would later go on to become Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, pushed for the prosecution of the men. The governor promised to pardon anyone arrested in connection with lynching. It turned out to be a moot point. First, the governor died of a heart attack because of the stress of what had happened in San Jose, or more likely, after he made his statement and all the stress that was added to his life because of that. And second, because no grand jury was willing to bring charges against the men. In the end, no one was ever tried for the killings.
7 arrested, DA ready, grand jury. Nope. I throw my arms up, Mick. Really? Unbelievable. My sass is broken.
Hollywood did make a movie based on the events called Fury, starring Spencer Tracy and Walter Brennan, directed by French Lane, who had escaped Nazi Germany. It would be nominated for an Oscar. The scenes of lynch mobs were said to look very much like what had happened in St. James Park, San Jose, California, on the 26th of November, 1933. Were the lynchings justifiable, like the governor and others claims? What about the police, like Sheriff Emig, who risked their lives to try and protect men they likely had no sympathy for? What role did the media play in feeding this bloodlust? It does beg the question, how far would we have to be pushed to become part of a crowd, blinded by hate to the point where we shove the rule of law aside just to take out our own vengeance? This has been History is Criminal. Join Kim and I next week as we dig into a serial killer in post war Japan. And if you like what you heard, tell a friend. And if you didn't like it, tell an enemy. Never suffer alone.